The Missouri River. For centuries, it was the great artery of the North American continent, a conduit of life, of trade, of migration. By the early 1820s, it had become something more, a river of ambition. It was the highway for a new, aggressive power pushing west, the United States. And on its banks, a collision of worlds was imminent. On March 10, 1823, a party of enterprising young men left the bustling port of St. Louis with fanfare. Their keelboats, the Yellowstone Packet and the Rocky Mountains, were laden with goods, 90 trappers, and the boundless optimism of a nation on the move. Led by General William H. Ashley, they were not soldiers or explorers in the traditional sense. They were businessmen, pioneers of a new form of commerce, heading for the rich beaver streams of the Rocky Mountains. But their journey up the Missouri would not lead to riches. Instead, it would ignite a conflict that has been largely forgotten, yet it was the first of its kind. The first official war between the United States Army and a native nation of the Great Plains. This is the story of the Arikara War of 1823, a bloody prelude to a century of conflict that would define the American West. Long before American trappers dreamed of Western wealth, the Upper Missouri was the domain of the Sawneesh people, known to the outsiders as the Arikara, or the Ree. They were not the nomadic hunters of popular imagination. The Arikara were a sophisticated, semi-sedentary society, living in large, well-fortified villages of distinctive earth lodges. Their power was rooted in the soil. They were master farmers, producing surpluses of corn, beans, and squash that were the envy of the plains. This agricultural wealth, combined with their strategic position on the river, made the Arikara formidable middlemen in the vast continental trade network. From their villages, they controlled the flow of goods, horses from the south, guns from the east, and hides from the nomadic hunting tribes of the west. To pass through their territory was to trade with them, on their terms. For generations, this economic leverage was the bedrock of their influence and survival. But their position, however powerful, was precarious. Decades of smallpox epidemics had ravaged their population, reducing their once numerous villages to just 2 fortified towns by 1823. And to their west, a powerful rival was expanding relentlessly, the Lakota Sioux, who frequently harassed and raided their villages, competing for resources and territory. The Arikara were caught in a delicate balancing act, their economic strength constantly tested by demographic weakness and military pressure. Any new threat to their control of the river trade was not just a commercial problem, it was an existential crisis. The Arikara's suspicion of the encroaching Americans was not born in 1823. It had been festering for nearly 2 decades. In 1805, the Lewis and Clark expedition had arrived with promises of peace and trade under a new Great Father in Washington. An influential and respected Arikara leader, Chief Ankaduchero, accepted their invitation to travel east and meet President Thomas Jefferson. It was a diplomatic mission of immense hope. But the hope turned to tragedy. In April 1806, Chief Ankaduchero died of an illness in the American capital. When the news was carried back to his people, it was met with disbelief and deep suspicion. The Americans, they felt, had not properly explained the death of their leader. The trust was broken. In the years that followed, the Arikara became increasingly hostile, at one point blocking the Missouri River entirely to American traders. This legacy of mistrust fueled a persistent demand. The Arikara wanted the Americans to build a permanent, fortified trading post in their territory, just as their enemies, the Sioux, had. This was not merely a request for convenient shopping. A permanent post would represent a tangible commitment, a fixed point of contact and accountability. Transient traders like William Ashley could make promises one season and vanish the next, as he had done in 1822 when he failed to deliver goods he had pledged. A fort would be an anchor for diplomacy and a potential bastion against their Sioux rivals. Ashley's refusal to provide one was seen as yet another American betrayal. confirming their untrustworthiness and leaving the Arikara feeling dangerously isolated. By the spring of 1823, the banks of the Missouri were a powder keg, waiting for a spark. The spark arrived in the form of General William H. Ashley's ambition. An aspiring politician and relentless entrepreneur, Ashley devised a plan to revolutionize the Western fur trade. His Rocky Mountain Fur Company would no longer depend on Native American partners. Instead of trading for furs, he would send his own corps of American trappers directly into the mountains to harvest the beaver themselves. Then he would supply them once a year at a prearranged rendezvous. It was a brilliant business model, but it was also a direct declaration of economic war on tribes like the Arikara. It was designed to shatter their role as middlemen and render them obsolete. When Ashley's boats pushed upriver in 1823, he had no intention of trading with the Arikara at all. He was forced to stop at their villages for one simple reason. His partner upriver, Andrew Henry, was short on horses. It was a decision of logistical necessity that would lead directly to disaster. On May 30th, 1823, Ashley arrived at the two Arikara towns. Cautious, he anchored his keelboats in the middle of the river and went ashore to negotiate with the chiefs, including a leader named Gray Eyes. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The Arikara were still furious over the recent killing of a chief's son by men from a rival American company, the Missouri Fur Company. They likely saw no distinction between the competing groups of white men and demanded restitution. Ashley deflected, offering gifts that the Arikara might have interpreted as an admission of guilt. He managed to trade for 19 horses, giving the Arikara muskets and ammunition, a decision that would soon prove fatal. The trading ended abruptly when Ashley refused to part with any more weapons. That evening, he was given a direct warning by another chief, Little Soldier, that an attack was being planned. Yet Ashley, confident in the strength of his 90 men, chose to ignore it. He made a critical, arrogant miscalculation, splitting his command by leaving 40 trappers, among them a young Jedediah Smith and a veteran hunter named Hugh Glass, camped on the exposed beach to guard the new horses. The final irrevocable line was crossed in the dead of night. Two of Ashley's men, Aaron Stevens and Edward Rose, slipped into the Arikara village, likely seeking the company of Arikara women. A confrontation erupted. Stevens was killed. This was not the cause of the war, but it was the ultimate violation, the final insult that unleashed nearly 20 years of pent-up rage and suspicion. Just before dawn on June 2nd, the Arikara unleashed their fury. From the safety of their wooden palisades, they poured a devastating fire of arrows and musket balls onto the exposed men on the beach. The trappers were caught in a perfect kill zone. Chaos erupted. Men scrambled for cover, using the bodies of their slain horses as barricades. The brief 15-minute battle was a slaughter. When the smoke cleared, between 12 and 15 of Ashley's men lay dead, with another 10 or 11 grievously wounded. The survivors scrambled aboard the boats and fled downriver in a panicked retreat. The ambitious expedition was in ruins. It was, as it was immediately called, the worst disaster in the history of the Western fur trade. Humbled and defeated, William Ashley regrouped his shattered force downriver. His men, thoroughly demoralized, refused his initial plan to armor the boats and fight their way past the Arikara villages. Ashley now sought not profit, but revenge. He dispatched urgent letters to the nearest military outpost, Fort Atkinson, and to the newspapers in St. Louis. He called upon the United States government to punish the Arikara and forcibly reopen the Missouri to American commerce. The call was answered by Colonel Henry Leavenworth, the commander of the U.S. 6th Infantry at Fort Atkinson. Acting on his own authority, Leavenworth declared the Arikara attack an outrage against the United States. He quickly organized a punitive expedition, a momentous decision that would mark the very first deployment of the U.S. Army in a combat role west of the Missouri River. The force that marched north in the summer of 1823 was a strange and volatile coalition, dubbed the Missouri Legion by Leavenworth himself. At its core were 230 regular U.S. Army soldiers. they were joined by 80 of Ashley's vengeful trappers and another 50 from the rival Missouri Fur Company, led by Joshua Pilcher, a man who had his own scores to settle with the Arikara. But the most formidable component of the Legion was not American. Leavenworth recruited 750 warriors from the Arikara's mortal enemies, the Sioux, including bands of Yankton, Yanktonai, and Lakota. Lured by the promise of captured horses, plunder, and the chance to seize Arikara territory, the Sioux eagerly joined the campaign. It was an alliance of convenience, a joining of American military power and indigenous rivalries, recorded for posterity in the Lakota's own pictographic histories, their winter counts.
On August 9th, the Missouri Legion arrived at the Arikara towns. The Sioux allies, impatient for battle, did not wait for the American infantry. They swept forward in a massive cavalry charge, crashing into the Arikara warriors who poured out from their villages to meet them. A fierce, swirling battle raged on the plains until the Arikara, seeing Leavenworth's regular troops advancing in formation, broke off and retreated behind their formidable log and earth palisades. The next morning, Leavenworth began his formal assault. He ordered his artillery, 2 cannons and a howitzer, to bombard the villages. But the attack was a fiasco. Due to what observers called ineptitude or carelessness, the gunners consistently overshot their targets. The cannonballs whistled harmlessly over the earthen lodges, doing little damage. Leavenworth then ordered his infantry to attack the upper village, but the Arikara defenders, firing from protected positions, held their ground and the assault stalled. The American commander now faced a difficult choice. A full-scale assault on the fortified villages would likely succeed, but at the cost of heavy casualties among his own men. Fearing this outcome, Leavenworth did the unthinkable in the eyes of his allies. He halted the attack and called for a truce. This decision shattered the fragile coalition. The Sioux allies were disgusted. They had come for a decisive battle and for the spoils of victory. Seeing neither, they began to abandon the field, helping themselves to the Arikara's ripe cornfields as they departed. The fur traders were apoplectic. Joshua Pilcher would later write a scathing letter accusing Leavenworth of imbecility and of leaving the Plains tribes with the greatest possible contempt for the American character. The result of this first military campaign in the West was not a demonstration of American strength, but of hesitation and weakness. For the Sioux, it was a formative lesson. The U.S. Army, it seemed, was not as powerful as it claimed. This perception, born on the battlefield in 1823, would have bloody consequences in the decades to come, as it may well have emboldened the very tribes the U.S. would later fight its largest and most costly wars against. Leavenworth negotiated a flimsy peace treaty, but the Arikara, fearing another attack, had no intention of staying. During the night of August 11th, the entire population of both villages vanished into the plains. Leavenworth declared victory and ordered his troops to withdraw. As the army marched away, they saw smoke rising behind them. Against the colonel's explicit orders, resentful fur traders had set fire to the ancestral homes of the Arikara, burning the empty villages to the ground. The war ended not with a bang, but with a bitter, inconclusive whimper, leaving a legacy of smoldering ruins and unresolved hatred. The Arikara War was more than a military campaign. It was a crucible, forging a new breed of American icon from the violence and hardship of the frontier. These were the survivors, the men who endured the unendurable. They were the revenants. The first of these new legends was Jedediah Smith. Only 24 years old in 1823, Smith was a quiet, devoutly religious man who carried his Bible as faithfully as his rifle. During the horrific beach attack on June 2nd, he distinguished himself with remarkable courage, holding his ground amidst the chaos. His leadership qualities were so apparent that William Ashley chose him for a desperate mission: to travel overland through hostile territory to find his partner, Andrew Henry, and summon reinforcements. After the failed military campaign, it was Smith who led one of the first parties of trappers to forge a new path overland, bypassing the now impassable river. It was on this journey that his legend was truly born. While scouting ahead of his party in the Black Hills, Smith was ambushed by a massive grizzly bear. The animal charged, breaking his ribs and clamping its jaws around his head, tearing his scalp and nearly ripping off his ear. His men killed the bear, but Smith's injuries were horrific. Calmly, he instructed his friend Jim Kleiman to get a needle and thread and sew the scalp back onto his head. Smith survived. For the rest of his life, he wore his hair long to hide the terrible scars, a living testament to the brutal realities of the West and the iron will required to survive it.